Have you been feeling like your marriage is hanging on by a thread? Well, you're not alone, but it doesn't have to stay that way. You can go from barely speaking to feeling connected again, from that constant tension to calm and real partnership. No more walking on eggshells. Let's go to laughing and flirting and enjoying each other again. It's not about sweeping the problems under the rug. It's about learning how to rebuild with emotional strength and better communication and the kind of leadership that creates safety, trust, and playfulness. This is how you move from the edge of divorce to a secure, strong, and genuinely happy marriage. Let's make that shift together. Do you ever catch yourself wondering, is my marriage doomed? Or do we actually have what it takes to make this last? It's a tough question, but a very important one. And there are two types of relationships, in my opinion: the strong ones that work on communication, collaboration, and connection. And then there are the ones that are struggling to even be in the same room together. So let's be honest: a strong marriage that lasts isn't built on luck. It's built on emotional maturity, honesty, communication, and the ability to lead through conflict, not just survive it. So the real question isn't, are we too far gone? It's, am I willing to show up differently? And that's what determines whether your marriage breaks or builds back stronger. Due to divorce? Well, let's talk about what that really looks like. It's not always the explosive fight or someone just walking out the door. Sometimes it's the slow, quiet breakdown, the same argument on repeat, the hurt feelings that never seem to really get repaired, and the emotional distance that just keeps growing even when you're in the same room. It's a cycle: conflict, disconnection, silence, repeat. And without tools like real communication, mutual respect, and healthy conflict resolution, it just feels impossible to break out of the cycle. So here's the hard truth: if nothing changes, the marriage stays stuck and eventually it breaks. But the good news is you can change it. Coaching, counseling, or workshops, they're not a sign of failure. They're a doorway to rebuilding what's been lost. But if it starts with owning your own reality, what's really going on, and choosing to lead differently. Built to last. What a healthy marriage actually looks like. It's not perfect and it's not argument free, but it is real and steady and safe. And in relationships that go the distance, both partners know how to talk and really listen. They don't avoid the tough conversations, they actually lean into them with honesty and respect. And no one's tending to walk around on eggshells. They can often share their thoughts and feelings without the fear of being shut down, judged, or attacked. And they listen to understand each other, not to win the argument. They validate each other's perspective, even when they may not fully agree. It's not about being the same, it's about feeling seen and heard and valued. That's what makes a marriage strong. That's what makes it last. You've probably heard about toxic relationships. Well, this is the kind of relationship where being together may do more harm than good. Instead of feeling supported and respected, one or both people feel drained, anxious, or like they just walk around on eggshells. Well, there's a lot of blame and control, silent treatment, manipulation, and constant fighting. It's not about having the occasional disagreement because every couple argues. It's when the pattern becomes unhealthy and communication breaks down over and over again. You've stopped feeling like a team. You feel stuck, unheard, and probably even afraid to speak up. That's when the shift goes from just struggling to toxic. You know that feeling when you try to say something and it just gets twisted? It's like no matter how carefully you try to bring something up, it just turns into a fight. That's what happens when communication gets off track. Instead of really hearing each other, there's a lot of misunderstanding or jumping to conclusion and getting defensive. You're not having a conversation, you're bracing for impact. And even simple things can snowball into arguments because both people are more focused on protecting themselves than solving the actual problem. It's exhausting and it pushes you further apart. Let's talk about disrespect because it's one of those things that slowly eats away at a relationship. It shows up when one or both partners have stopped treating each other with any basic care. Maybe it's name calling, constant sarcasm, or those little comments that are meant to tear the other person down. It's feelings dismissed and like your boundaries are just being ignored. When you bring something up, instead of being heard, you might get the eye roll or the snide remark. And over time, it chips away at the trust. And eventually you stop opening up because it just doesn't feel safe to be honest anymore. That's when disrespect becomes the norm and connection starts to disappear. I guess we have to face it because when trust breaks down, everything gets harder. You start to second guess everything all the time. Where are they? What did they mean by that? If they are even being honest at all. Maybe something happened, a betrayal or a lie, or just a slow buildup of broken promises. And now, instead of feeling safe and secure, there's this constant tension. You might feel like you have to watch your back, or that you're always one step away from being let down by that person. And when trust is gone, even the smallest issues can feel huge because you're not sure where you stand. It's like walking on a shaky floor that used to feel solid. Do you ever have those fights that just seem to start small and then blow up out of nowhere? Well, that's what happens when a couple has gotten stuck in a destructive conflict pattern. Because instead of talking things out, it turns into the blame game. Your voices go up, the walls go up, and before you know it, you're either yelling or just shutting down. Nothing actually gets solved. It just leaves both people feeling more hurt and more distant, and ultimately more fed up. And after a while, you may just start avoiding certain topics altogether. But the tension doesn't go away. It just builds under the surface. And it's not just the conflict, it's the way the conflict happens that really does the damage. Being in a toxic relationship can leave you feeling completely worn out, not just tired, but drained, like you've got nothing left to give. It's the kind of exhaustion that comes from always walking on eggshells or being under tension, always trying to keep the peace or never feeling good enough, no matter what you do. One person might end up calling all the shots while the other person feels stuck and powerless, unheard, and maybe even invisible. And over time, it chips away at your confidence and your sense of self. You start to wonder, is it me? Am I the problem? But deep down, you know something just isn't right. It shouldn't be this hard to feel okay in your own relationship. When there's been a lot of issues in a relationship, there seems to be an inequality. It usually feels like one person's voice matters more than the other. Maybe one partner is always making all the decisions or steering the conversation and setting the tone, while the other kind of just goes along with it, whether they agree or not. And over time, that creates a quiet buildup of resentment. You start to feel like your opinions don't count, like your needs are always second, and it's frustrating because a healthy relationship should feel like a partnership, not a power struggle or a one-man show. When the balance is off for too long, connection starts to fade and frustration will ultimately take its place. Healthy relationships tend to share similar characteristics, and some of them like effective communication, where partners engage in open discussions, they're honest, and they express their thoughts and feelings freely. They listen to each other and they validate each other. And they share mutual respect. They value the other person's opinions and feelings and their individuality, and they support each other's growth and encourage personal development. They have trust and safety. There's a strong sense of this between the partners, which makes them feel secure and that they can rely on each other without fear of betrayal or manipulation. They definitely know how to resolve conflicts. They're addressed constructively. They work together to find solutions, and they handle disagreements through patience and empathy rather than hostility. They create a supportive environment, and it's practical, and they celebrate the other person's wins, and they're there during some of those life challenges that we all face. And they have a strong sense of equality. They share responsibilities in the relationship, they make decisions together, and they actually value the other person's input equally. When communication is healthy, it just feels easier to breathe in the relationship. You can actually say what you're thinking without fear of it being twisted or ignored or turned into a fight. You can both speak honestly but with respect. You listen to understand, not to defend yourself or plan a comeback. And even if you don't agree, there's a sense of, hey, I hear you and that matters. And that kind of back and forth builds trust and safety. And honestly, that's where real connection lives. Not in being perfect, but in feeling safe enough to be real with each other. When there is mutual respect in a relationship, you feel like you're on the same team.
You don't have to agree on everything, but you value each other's opinions and you make it matter what they want to say, and you make space for that. You treat each other like equals. You're not trying to control or fix the other person. You're there to support them and encourage them and let them grow into what they are meant to be. It's that deep sense of, I've got your back and I know you've got mine. When respect is there, love tends to feel a lot safer and so much stronger. When a couple has solid trust, the whole relationship feels different. You're not walking around on edge or wondering what's really going on. You know your partner has your back. You can be honest and open and vulnerable and even messy sometimes, and it still feels safe. There's not a fear of being judged or manipulated or betrayed, and you can rely on each other not just when things are easy, but when life gets hard too, because it's that kind of emotional safety where love actually grows and you don't have to question someone's intentions. You can finally relax and just be yourself. In healthy relationships, conflicts aren't about winning or losing. They're about understanding each other and finding a way forward together. Instead of letting things just blow up or both partners have to take a step back, they stay patient and they really listen. They focus on solutions, not blame. It's less about who's right and more about how to make things better. Even when they disagree, there's empathy and teamwork in how they handle it. In a solid marriage, you're not just roommates, you're teammates. That means showing up for each other emotionally and practically. And when your wife succeeds, you're genuinely proud and you celebrate with her. When she's struggling, you don't just watch from the sidelines. You step in, you support her, and you let her know she's not alone. And that goes both ways. A supportive marriage feels like a partnership when you both know, I've got you and you've got me. Additionally, a healthy marriage isn't about one person calling all the shots. It's about being a team, and that means sharing the load or making decisions together, whether that be about finances, parenting, or even what's for dinner, because your wife's voice matters just as much as yours. And when you both feel you've been heard and respected, the relationship runs smoother. It's not about keeping a score, it's about showing up equally and building something solid together. What are some of the key differences between healthy and toxic relationships? Well, it lies in the presence or absence of respect, trust, and effective communication. Healthy relationships foster growth and emotional safety, while toxic relationships create conflict and insecurity and a lot of emotional distress. So, recognizing these differences is crucial for individuals seeking to cultivate positive connections or navigate the challenges in their existing relationships. How to change? Well, first is increasing emotional intelligence and learning effective communication and conflict resolution methods, such as constructive check ins, mirroring and validating, and my quadrant method. These can significantly improve the quality of the relationship. Here's how each method contributes to fostering healthy interactions and avoiding those toxic dynamics. Some time ago, I had a real epiphany as a marriage counselor. During a profound realization of a particularly challenging session, I watched a couple visibly frustrated and defensive, and they went round and round in circles, discussing their issues without any meaningful progress. And it hit me in that moment. Traditional talk therapy methods weren't serving them well. And this approach often places couples in the very environment that exacerbates their conflicts. I began to understand that when couples enter therapy while entrenched in conflict, it creates an unsafe environment for open communication and genuine healing. So instead of fostering progress, it often leads to deeper resentment and feelings of failure. This realization sparked my commitment to develop a more effective method, one that prioritizes constructive engagement and equips couples with immediate tools for resolution before diving into their underlying issues. Crucially, my method fosters the couple's ability to replicate these skills independently, allowing them to navigate challenges without ongoing support from a therapist. I believe in fostering independence from the counseling process by teaching practical strategies that couples can use on their own, regardless of the issues that may arise in the future. So, by proactively supporting couples in developing these skills, I can create a foundation for lasting change that ultimately transforms their relationships for the better. And this epiphany not only reshaped my approach to therapy, but it inspired me to guide couples towards healthier, more fulfilling connections that empower them long after they leave my office. I thought it could be helpful to give a case study on a few couples that I've been working with over the last couple of months and how they've used some of the techniques to go from struggling to strengthened. Let's talk about Bob and Susan. Of course, their names have been changed for their protection. This is a couple in the early 60s, and they've been married for over 35 years. They've raised 3 kids together and built a life filled with shared experiences. However, in the recent years, they had found themselves growing increasingly distant, and their frustrations and misunderstandings had begun to mount. That had led to frequent arguments. And despite this long history together, both felt trapped and unhappy, and Susan had even begun contemplating divorce. After the initial assessment, I understood that Bob and Susan were expressing feelings of being unheard and unappreciated in this relationship. And Bob often resorted to just withdrawing when tensions arose, while Susan felt frustrated when her attempts to communicate were not handled and they were met with silence. It became clear that traditional talk therapy had not provided the tools they needed to navigate their disagreements more effectively. So some of the key issues that I identified, they had a breakdown in communication that was leading to these misunderstandings. They had developed an emotional distance and feelings of resentment. They had a very big lack of effective conflict resolution skills. And their history of avoidance when facing conflict wasn't working either. So after really reviewing the situation, I introduced them to my Quadrant Method program. And this program focuses on effective communication and conflict resolution. The key components to this were teaching them how to do constructive check-ins. We established a weekly check-in routine where they could express their thoughts and feelings openly in a safe environment. I taught them how to mirror and validate. And this technique encourages both of them to actively listen to the other and then reflect back what they hear. And this fosters a deep understanding of each other's emotions. And of course, I taught them how to negotiate during conflict. We utilized the Quadrant Method to identify the issues and help prioritize their needs and collaboratively brainstorm solutions. And this approach helped them work through these disagreements without having to assign blame. And then over the course of several weeks, Bob and Susan had diligently practiced this technique, and they'd introduced themselves to something very new in their relationship. And their commitment to the weekly check-ins had made a noticeable reduction in the daily tensions. And they now began to share their feelings in a constructive manner rather than to resort to some passive-aggressive and nasty behaviors. So during a discussion about household responsibilities, instead of sidestepping the issue, Bob used the mirror technique, where he reflected Susan's concerns about feeling overwhelmed, saying things like, "I hear that you managing the household feels like too much sometimes." And this acknowledgement led to a calm discussion about how they could divide chores fairly, which they had long neglected to address in the past. And so by the end of my program, Bob and Susan had started to report feeling connected again. They discovered that the act of active listening and validating each other's feelings had significantly improved their emotional intimacy. And so rather than approaching disputes defensively, they had learned to see each other's work together and work for solutions. By implementing the conflict resolution, Bob and Susan not only saved their marriage, but it also fostered a renewed sense of partnership. And I'm happy to report that their ability to communicate effectively and resolve conflicts in this healthy way has really transformed their relationship. And this case illustrates that even long-term marriages can thrive with the right tools and commitment to understanding each other better. And as they continue and practice these skills they learned, they both feel more equipped to face any future challenges together. This is reinforcing the bond that has lasted for over 35 years with this couple. It was beautiful to watch. Here's another couple that I worked with, Amy and Stuart. Well, we needed to work on rebuilding trust after an affair. So Amy and Stuart had been married for 15 years and they were in their late 30s. They had 2 young children together, but their relationship had been under a significant strain when Amy discovered that Stuart had been unfaithful. The affair shattered their trust and created a storm of emotions, leading to high conflict between them. Both felt an immense hurt and betrayal, and communication had devolved into blaming and arguing without any resolution. In our first meeting, it became clear that both Amy and Stuart were struggling to navigate those heavy emotions. Amy was feeling devastated and angry, while Stuart exhibited some guilt but a lot of defensiveness. Their conversations were filled with accusations, making it difficult for either partner to express their feelings in any type of constructive manner. They needed some structure. They needed to approach these issues from the affair and create a pathway for rebuilding trust. So some of the issues that we identified is that they were under a lot of emotional pain and the betrayal, the inability to communicate effectively without having these things escalate to conflict quickly, a lot of unresolved baggage from the past issues that had contributed to the affair. They had a lack of established boundaries for discussions about the affair. And what we did is we introduced Amy and Stuart to the quadrant method by emphasizing communication and conflict resolution methods tailored to their situation. The key components included we had to establish boundaries. We worked together to create a set of guidelines for discussing the affair. This included agreeing on specific times for these discussions and ensuring that they approached the topic with respect and openness, focusing on their feelings rather than accusations. We developed constructive checking in. We had weekly check-ins where both of them were allowed to express their thoughts and feelings and emotions in a safe way. This practice helped to address ongoing feelings of hurt and allowed for healing conversations together. We did some mirror invalidating where I taught them how to use this technique to enhance the communications. So, for example, when discussing the emotions regarding the affair, each partner would reflect back what they heard from the other. And this was fostering a deeper understanding. We had to address some of the baggage that was there before. We explored these underlying issues and that those past interactions had contributed to the current conflict. This included discussions on emotional needs, unmet expectations, and past grievances that needed resolutions. Over several sessions, Amy and Stuart demonstrated commitment to the process. They were wonderful. By following the boundaries that they had negotiated and established for discussions about the affair, they created an environment where both could express their feelings without being triggered or heightened emotions or defensiveness. For instance, during a check-in, Amy shared her feelings of insecurity following the discovery of this affair. And Stuart, using the mirroring technique, responded, "I hear you saying that you feel insecure about our future after what happened, and I understand that. I want to work on rebuilding that trust with you." And this simple act of reflection helped diffuse tension and allowed Amy to feel heard. She really was moved. And as they continued to work through their issues, Amy and Stuart began to address and resolve some of the baggage they'd been carrying for their past for a long time. They learned to communicate their needs more effectively, which helped them build a deeper emotional connection. And throughout the program, they established a lot healthier patterns of engagement, which ultimately contributed to a renewed sense of partnership. Let's be real. The mind games, the arguments that go nowhere, and the same old communication breakdowns, they're exhausting. If you're tired of feeling like you're just spinning your wheels in your marriage, it's time to make a change. This isn't about pointing fingers, it's about stepping up. When you grow your emotional intelligence, you start handling conflict with clarity and calm. You stop reacting and start responding. With the right tools and techniques, you can communicate more effectively, resolve issues faster, and create a relationship that actually feels good for both of you. Wouldn't that be lovely? One big step in eliminating some of these games is constructive check-ins. How it helps is that it creates an open dialogue. Regularly checking in with your partner establishes a routine for these communications, allowing both individuals to express their feelings and needs without concerns of waiting for conflict to arise. Also, having an emotional awareness. This method promotes emotional awareness, helping both partners identify and articulate their feelings. It creates a safe place for discussing both positive experiences and your areas of concern. And by preventing resentment, by addressing these small issues before they escalate, constructively checking in helps prevent frustration and resentment from building up. And that reduces the likelihood of toxic interactions. Because healthy relationships are couples who regularly check in, and that creates a supportive environment. Look, if you're stuck in the same arguments feeling like nothing you say gets through or walking around on eggshells just to keep the peace, it's time to shift gears. Stop playing defense in your marriage. Let's start leading. That means stepping up with real communication, cutting out the passive aggressiveness, and ending the hostile back and forth that's wearing you both down. You can learn how to eliminate the games, the blame and the breakdown and all of the things, and you can start leading with clarity, respect, and strength. Your marriage doesn't need perfection. It needs you to show up differently.
So let's be honest. This is probably why you're here. The tension is thick. The arguments keep circling back to the same old stuff. The silent treatment feels like it's as loud as if you're yelling. You're walking on eggshells and it's exhausting. You're not looking to keep score anymore. You're looking for connection. You want to feel like partners again, not opponents. And deep down, you know something has to change, and maybe it starts with you.
Here's the truth. The blow-ups, the emotional games, and the constant miscommunication, they're not just bad days. They're habits. They're patterns that you've created. Not because you're a bad guy, but because you've never been taught a better way. And if you don't put a stop to them, they will slowly eat away at your marriage. Not overnight, not with a big explosion, but quietly through the distance, resentment, and the disconnection. Well, the good news, you can break those patterns, but it starts with recognizing them and doing the work to lead differently. Let's talk about what a lot of men do when things get tough in their marriage. Unfortunately, they tend to defend themselves instead of listening. They shut down or avoid the conversation altogether. They keep score. Who did what? Who said what? Who's winning? And sometimes they pull back emotionally or physically. They withhold love or affection or even attention. And yeah, sarcasm, silent treatment, or those other passive-aggressive digs sneak in too. Does this sound familiar? They aren't signs of a bad man, they're just habits. But if you keep doing what you've always done, you'll keep getting the same results. So are you ready to do it differently? So why do men fall into the same patterns of shutting down or getting defensive and playing games? Well, usually it's about fear. Fear of losing respect or losing control, or even maybe fear of being vulnerable. And instead of saying that out loud, you build walls. You hide behind the sarcasm or the silence. You try to act like it doesn't bother you, but it does. And the truth is, the more you protect yourself, the more disconnected your marriage will become. And nothing changes until you do. Here's the shift that changes everything in marriage. It's not about how clever your comebacks are. It's not about proving you're right or winning the argument. It's about how you show up when the tensions become real. Because real leadership in a marriage isn't loud, it's steady. It's calm under pressure. It listens before reacting. So instead of thinking, how do I win this? Start asking yourself, how do I lead through this? That shift can save your marriage. It provides connection. So most people tell me they want to be a good partner. They want to lead in their marriage instead of constantly competing. And here's how that shift starts happening. So you stop escalating. You don't have to raise your voice to be heard, and staying calm is strength, not a weakness. So you can stop defending. Every comment is not an attack. Sometimes your wife just needs you to listen and not argue your case. Start owning your side. Leadership makes taking responsibility fair. What you do and how you show up. Speak your solutions. Instead of replaying the problem over and over, focus on what's next. Be the guy who moves things forward. When you stop trying to win and start leading, everything in the relationship begins to shift. Are you ready to stop with the back and forth games in your marriage? Well, here's some ways that you can do that. When she's emotional, you stay calm. That's leadership. Sometimes don't take her feelings as an attack. Validate them. Don't jump into defense mode. If you mess up, own it fast. No dodging, no blaming, just take responsibility. And here's the mind shift that changes when the games start going to who's asking the right questions. Start asking, what gets us through this? That's how you stop the cycle. That's how you lead the relationship forward. And here's what actually changes when you start leading instead of reacting. She stops seeing you as the enemy. You stop seeing her as the problem. And instead of staying stuck in defense mode, you may both start breathing again. You can rebuild trust, not because you're perfect, because you're consistent. You rebuild respect because you show up with calm, not control. And slowly you create space where real connection can happen again. This is the kind of leadership that heals. Not loud, not forceful, just solid. I can say this with a high degree of certainty. Your wife does not need one more argument. She is not looking for the perfect comeback. She's watching to see if you're becoming different. Are you growing? Are you leading? If you're stuck in blame, shutdown, or power plays, that's not leadership. That's just another round of the same old cycle. So it's time to stop playing games and start showing up as the man you know you can be. So let's talk about emotional IQ, because this is where real change starts. It's the difference between constant blame, dead-end arguments, and emotional standoffs versus actually getting each other. When you raise your emotional IQ, you start picking up on what's really going on beneath the surface, in yourself and in her. And you stop reacting. You start responding with clarity and calm. And suddenly, communication doesn't feel like a war. It feels like connection. That's how you go from butting heads to building something stronger. Not just fewer fights, but deeper intimacy. If you've gotten stuck in the cycle of blaming, arguing, or hitting an emotional stalemate in your marriage, you're not alone. But here's the truth. The fastest way to break that cycle and rebuild trust is by increasing your emotional intelligence. That means learning how to read the room, understand what she's really feeling and what you're actually feeling. Respond with clarity instead of reacting in a heated way. So when you raise your emotional IQ, the conversations change. The connection deepens and the trust starts coming back faster than you would have ever thought. Because it's not about being perfect, it's about being present with an emotional skill level. Because you're stuck, you keep having the same arguments. The conversation either explodes or just shuts down. And at the end of the day, you all feel unheard, misunderstood, and completely disconnected from each other. And I know it's frustrating, it's exhausting, and it feels like nothing ever changes. And here's what most guys don't realize. Blame, arguing, and emotional stalemates, they're not about logic, they're about emotional intelligence. The ability to understand what's going on underneath the surface in you and in her. And when you build that skill, everything starts to shift. So let's get real about the core problem in conflict. It's not that you don't care, and it's not that you're not trying. But here are the 3 common mistakes men make when things get heated. They try to fix emotional problems with logic. You're thinking, if I can just explain it clearly, this will all make sense. But what she needs isn't logic, it's for you to feel with her first. Reacting to what she's saying instead of seeing what she really needs. Sometimes the words are sharp, but underneath it she's overwhelmed, scared, or feeling alone. Don't miss that. Getting defensive instead of getting curious. When you jump to defend yourself, you miss a huge opportunity to actually understand her and respond with strength, not ego. Fixing conflicts is about shifting your approach, not winning the argument. And here's what happens when those conflicts have the same mistakes keep showing up. You're likely to hear from her, you just don't get it. You never listen. Why do I even bother? And honestly, she means it. Because from her side, it feels like nothing is changing. It's the same fight, the same frustration, the same exhausting cycle on repeat. Not because you don't care, but because no one taught you how to handle emotional conflict differently. It's not about being broken. It's about needing better tools and learning how to use them. If you want to break the cycle of conflict in your marriage, here's where it starts. Well, step one, read the room, not just the words. When she's frustrated, it's easy to focus on what she's saying. But emotional intelligence means looking deeper. Ask yourself, what's the real need behind this? Maybe she needs attention. Maybe she's craving a connection. Or maybe she just wants to feel secure or truly heard. And when you stop reacting to the surface and start responding to the need, you shift the entire dynamic. This isn't about being a mind reader. It's about showing up with curiosity and emotional awareness. That is real leadership in any relationship. Next, let's stop reacting and start leading. So when things get tense, your power isn't having the last word. It's in how calm you can stay. Leadership in a marriage means you set the tone, not by being passive, but being present. Instead of snapping back or shutting down, say something like, help me understand this. What's really going on beneath all of this? That one line can shift everything. Because here's the truth, calm ends fights, leadership will end blame. And when you lead with emotional steadiness, you open the door to real connection. And here's a major shift that most men need to make in conflict. Validate before you solve. Your first instinct might be to fix it, offer solutions, or give advice, or just make the problem go away. But what she really needs first is to feel understood. When you slow down and say something like, I see you, I hear you, and your feelings matter, you're not being weak, you're building trust. Because validation isn't about agreeing, it's about showing her that she's not alone in what she's feeling. And once she feels safe and heard, you will talk solutions like you have never been able to talk before. So, what happens when you start leading with emotional intelligence? Well, blame disappears because you're not just defending, you're listening. Arguments tend to dissolve because you're not feeding the fire, you're calming it. And stalemates break because you're showing up differently. And now connection returns because she finally feels safe, heard, and understood. How does that work? Well, because you're speaking the emotional need, not just reacting to the surface level words, this is how leadership looks in a marriage.
I want to talk to you about a simple and powerful tool that you can use to help stop the endless cycle of arguing and the blaming and the ultimate shutting down in your marriage. It's called the quadrant method.
How can we get through conflicts in a more constructive way? Well, my quadrant method provides a structured framework to identify and address the issues in any relationship. And by categorizing concerns into specific areas, couples can tackle conflicts methodically. This method helps partners understand each other's viewpoints and also explore their underlying needs and desires. It encourages a dialogue about what each person values, which can lead to better negotiation and solutions. It's collaborative. The quadrant method emphasizes working together toward a common goal, transforming conflict into opportunity for collaboration rather than a competition. And it builds healthy relationships by using an approach that helps effectively end conflict. It enhances your ability to find mutually satisfying solutions. You spend time in understanding power struggles, reverse struggles, conflicts, and negotiations. So here's what's keeping you stuck. You react emotionally, you defend yourself instead of leading. So let's talk about the real problem. It's the same old fight, the one that just keeps showing up, maybe with just different words. It goes like this. You get defensive, she gets emotional, you both try to win, and the moment is lost. But here's the truth. You might win the fight, but you lose the connection. You get pulled into the power struggle instead of focusing on the solution. And the quadrant method will give you a step-by-step process to stay calm, stay focused, and lead through conflict, not get swallowed up by it. And if the goal is closeness, trust, and peace, then winning doesn't mean as much if your relationship is strong. It's the time to stop the cycle, not by fighting harder, but by leading differently. So there's the old way, reacting, snapping, shutting down. It's time for something better. The solution is the quadrant method. This powerful approach that helps you stop reacting and start leading. Instead of blowing up or backing off, you will learn 4 clear steps to handle conflict calmly, constructively, and with clarity. And leadership that will help your marriage grow. Because the goal isn't to win the fight, it's to move through it in a way that builds trust, not building walls. Are you ready to lead differently? So let's start with this. Before you even open your mouth in a conflict, maybe you could ask yourself, what is actually going on inside of me right now? Am I feeling triggered or defensive or disrespected? And if so, pause, take a breath, slow it down. This isn't about stuffing your feeling. It's about checking in with them before they take over the moment. And then ask yourself, am I reacting or responding? That question alone can change the entire tone of a conversation and the outcome, because emotional leadership starts with self-awareness. And next, it's about understanding, not winning. When conflict hits, most guys go into fix-it mode or debate mode. But the real breakthrough comes when you stop trying to win and start trying to understand. So maybe you ask yourself, what is she really upset about? What is the deeper need underneath this? And maybe it's about connection. Maybe it's about feeling safe or respected. And instead of defending, get curious and ask yourself, what's the story she's telling herself right now? Because behind every outburst or shutdown, there's a story. And when you seek to understand it, the tension starts to fade and the connection can start to return. Here's a powerful shift that you can use in the heat of any argument. Instead of reacting out of frustration or shutting down, try leading the conversation calmly. Maybe you could say something like, it sounds like this really matters to you. I want to understand how we can move forward. That one line can change the whole tone in any conversation because it shows presence, not pressure. It leads with empathy and not ego. When you lead with calm, you create the space for connection and not more conflict. So let's talk about what happens after the argument, because conflict isn't complete until there's a resolution and a repair. And that's where leadership shows up again. So what I want you to do is end with clarity, no more loose ends. Agree on the next steps, even if they're small, and work to rebuild trust, not by being defensive, but by showing follow through and care. And here's the question that changes that dynamic. How can we prevent this from happening again? It's not about being perfect. It's about being committed to. That's when you move from conflict to connection. So why does this approach actually work? Well, because when you lead with emotional intelligence instead of reactivity, everything shifts. Fights tend to get shorter, they don't spiral like before, and resentment will fade because you're handling things and not avoiding them. Respect is rebuilt, and you see each other showing up differently, and connection starts coming back because now there's safety and clarity. So don't get dragged into it. You're not just trying to survive the argument, you're setting the tone for the relationship. And what I know is that when I do better, my partner is also inclined to do better. So let's make the shift.
So here's the bottom line. If you've been stuck in the same fight, feeling unheard, disconnected, or like no matter what you do, nothing changes, it's not because you're broken. It's because no one taught you how to lead through conflict with emotional intelligence. Now you've seen what's possible. Shorter fights, less defensiveness, more respect, and real connection. Not by controlling the situation, but by controlling your presence and your response and your leadership. If you're ready to stop reacting and start leading in a way that actually rebuilds trust and restores the connection in your marriage, then let's talk. All you have to do is book a free consultation and we'll map out what that could look like for you. Let's plan that next conversation. Over the next several weeks, Flip the Scripts will be accepting motivated men into our program. We are seeking people who are looking to empower themselves with emotional intelligence, effective communication, and conflict resolution skills. So you've made it this far in the video, and that means I know you care. You're showing up and you're looking for answers because you're tired of the same fights, the silence, and the distance that feels like it just keeps growing. And let me encourage you. I really want you to hear me when I say this. You don't have to keep doing it this way. You don't have to stay stuck in these patterns, and you don't have to keep carrying the weight of a relationship that feels like it's slipping through your hands. There is a better way to communicate, a better way to handle your conflict, and a better way to be heard without yelling, shutting down, or walking on eggshells. So let this land. What I teach, it's not therapy, it's not guesswork. It's a proven method built on real tools, real psychology, and real results. And if anything I've said today sounded familiar, if it hit home, then this is your invitation to flip the script. Let's do something different. I want to walk through this with you to help you stop fighting and build back the trust and feel like a team again. You don't need to be perfect, you just need to be ready. Let's get started. So, if you're ready to take the next step, I'd love to talk with you personally. All you have to do is click the link below, and that will allow you to request a free consultation. And we can talk one on one and look at where things are breaking down in your relationship. I'll walk you through exactly how I can help you. There's no pressure, just clarity. This is your chance to stop guessing and finally get a real plan that actually works. You've made it this far, so don't stop. Let's schedule that consultation and start flipping the script together. I look forward to meeting you.